All right, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining on this alternate day and time arrangement. We have speakers that are coming from multiple continents and multiple time zones, and this was pretty much the only friendly time that we were able to find to do this, even though we're still asking our speakers to suffer a little bit, but they assure me that they're caffeinated and ready to go. So we have three speakers today that are going to be talking about a couple of interrelated topics. The overall title for this is going to be Global BCP for Routing Policy and Security, but we're going to touch on a couple of different things, including MANRS and RPKI. So I'm pleased to introduce the three speakers. We have Awal and Phil, who are both going to be representing the Network Startup Research Center. And we have Aftab, who is representing the Internet Society. And I believe that Phil is going to be our first speaker. So I will turn it over to you, Phil, to get us started today.
Yep, I will be first up. So let me just start my screen share. And you should now be seeing the slides. Okay, so we've really, because of the three of us, we've tried to divide up really what we're going to be talking about into three sections. So I'll really just be doing a general overview, just looking at routing policy and security, as Jason did in the introduction. Awal will be talking about his project that he was doing for a fair chunk of last year across South Asia. And then Aftab will finish off really by looking at the MANRS Observatory and a lot of the current RPKI statistics. So hopefully we'll try and cover enough of this to just be of general interest for all of you. And what I'm going to try and do is really just look at some of the current operational practices today. Aftab's going to talk all about really what MANRS is, but I think it's worth mentioning here what this is trying to do. MANRS, the mutually agreed norms for routing security. The website is there, and it focuses on basically these 4 points I've put on the slide: filtering eBGP sessions, blocking traffic with spoofed source addresses, enabling communication between network operators. You'd be surprised how little communication there can be in some parts of the world. And of course, the validation of routing information. And we're going to probably spend most of our time looking at the last one, because in theory, the previous three should be widely known and widely used, because they've been around probably since, well, certainly since last century. Let me put it that way. So the focus is on RPKI. We're going to look at route origin authorization. And so this is really a digital signature indicating the origin AS of an announced route. This is well established globally. It's been around for at least 10 years, widely deployed, and more operators are now signing ROAs every week, as Aftab will show you in detail later on. Typical ROA would look something like this. It indicates the prefix, the maximum subnet size that prefix would go to. So I've used 10.10/16 in the example here. Max length is /18, which basically means out of 10.10.00/16, all subnets up to /18 would be covered by this ROA. And it indicates the origin AS as well. So one thing to note, a lot of people don't realize, you can have more than one ROA per address block. So this allows an operator to originate prefixes from more than one autonomous system. So it allows for changes in routing policy, if you want to change your AS number, or if you want to employ organizations that will do, I suppose, remote trigger black hole filtering for you. Where do you see the ROAs? Well, there are lots and lots of places, but Route Views is one of the projects taking place at University of Oregon, which is NSRC's host organization. And of course, Route Views has been around since the early 90s, a router you can log into and see stuff. That's been at least my use of it since it started in the mid 90s. And to find out what the ROAs are, you can jump onto, well, this is the Cisco router that RoutFuse operates at the University of Oregon, and you simply do show IP BGP RPKI table, and you will be shown all the V4 ROAs. You can do the same thing for IPv6, show BGP IPv6 unicast RPKI table. I will give you that. There are many places around the internet now that you can actually jump on and find these particular tables, but I thought I would just show you a nice and easy telnet, or in this case, secure shell access, where you can do this. You can also find out Hurricane Electric. Everybody knows the bgp.he.net page, which basically gets a lot of BGP tables and displays it in a nice intuitive graphical format like this. I've just picked on IIJ for no reason, apart from they've got lots and lots of ROAs. And it just shows you the sort of display that you might see on the HE site. The green key indicates a valid ROA. And more statistics. This is on the RIPE NCC webpage, the certification stat page that they have, and that's kept a history of basically this one is the number of ROAs. And you can see that it's a usual kind of exponential increase, started off slowly through 2011, 12, 13, and things really have taken off 2019 and through 2020. The different colors indicate the different registries, and you can see the blue color, lightish kind of blue color, is ARAN region, North America, and that's really taken off big time in mid-2020, as you can see by the steepness of the graph there. APNIC region is kind of interesting. There seem to be folks that have signed ROAs and then withdrawn them and then re-signed them and then taken them away again, as you can see by the spikiness on the magenta graph there. The V4 address space covered, this is measured in 24s, steady increase from most registry regions, apart from ARAN, again, mid-2020. It looks like maybe one organization with a lot of address space has just gone on a signing spree. And looking V6, less exciting in V6, which is kind of a bit of a shame, but you notice that huge step at the end of 2018 for the RIPE NCC region. I was just chatting with somebody earlier this evening, my time, and this is probably a /20 or 2 in V6 that have been signed probably late 2018. I haven't looked up who it could have been back through the history, but it just shows you the kind of impact and what's going on in the different regions. So we're focusing on RPKI, as I mentioned before, looking at route origin validation now, and this is where the network operator will check if a valid ROA exists for the entry in the BGP table. If it's valid, you allow the prefix through. If it's invalid, you drop it. If it's not found, you generally allow it, but give it a low preference. And this is generally the common practice today. And really a lot of our effort over the recent, at least the last year, has been to try and encourage people to get these ROAs signed and start dropping the invalids. And it's not just one or two operators that you never ever heard of. We've now got most of the so-called tier 1 providers in the commercial internet who are now doing ROV. And it's not just the transit providers, but you've got the content providers, the exchange points, research and education networks, and access providers. I've got a list there on the right-hand side. This is not meant to be exhaustive. This is just the list of people I've seen announcing on various NOG lists or on Twitter or wherever else they like advertising the fact that they're now doing route origin validation. And how to go about deploying it. People think this is a very, very scary, difficult, and needs months and months of research and so forth to try and do. No, it's not, nothing like that at all. This is actually really simple, but a lot of operators have a good policy of being cautious. So first off, sign the ROAs for originated address space. This is easy to do, has no operational impact. Just added to the standard operating procedure. Basically, if that prefix is going to be originated, get it signed, and just add that in as one of the many other things that you need to do when you're originating a prefix. Step 2, I would observe, so deploy a validator cache. In other words, you get the ROAs from the registries and other folks operating CAs. The eBGP speaking routers will talk with this cache, and you don't implement any policies. In other words, don't drop your invalids. If using Cisco iOS or iOS XE, well, those automatically drop invalids, which is a bit of a problem if you just want to sit and observe. And just have a look and see what these invalids are. If you feel that some of the invalids would impact your end users or your customers, well, probably try and figure out why these are invalids, because it might just be an operational error, or it might be a true genuine hijack. And how are you going to tell the difference? But at least have a look and see what they are, because it'll prepare you for when you actually go on to step 3, which is to do the full deployment, where you deploy redundant validator caches and implement ROV properly, which I'll cover next. So where do you find out the invalids before you even start on this? Well, you can jump onto route views again. There are many other places too, but here's the route views 3 node, which is running free range routing, FRR. And on that, the route views team have set up a route map called invalid, which will display the invalids. So you do show IPBGP route map invalid to get the V4s, and show BGP IPv6 route map invalid to get the V6 invalids. We'll come back to some of these in a minute. There's some best practices for creating ROAs. Now, in the early days, what a lot of people did was, oh, this ROA thing, this is great fun. Let's go and sign everything on all subnets and everything, and it's just wonderful. Actually, this is actually really bad. It's really important not to create ROAs for unannounced subnets, because what you then end up with is something what's called a validated hijack. So I've just picked a problematic ROA out of that table that I started displaying in the previous slide. So this is not made up. This is real, live today, at least during this presentation. 1.34.00/15, the ROA has been created for /15 all the way down to /24. There's an issue here, because this now says that every single subnet size between /15 and 24 out of 1.34.0.0 is valid. But not every single subnet out of that size is announced, as you can find out if you look at the BGP table. So what can happen is that an attacker can use AS3462, which is originating 1.34.0.0/15, pick an unannounced /24, and just use it for the heart's content, because the thing is, it's going to have a valid ROA. So even the operators who do drop invalids will see this as being perfectly acceptable prefix. So it's kind of actually really important to only sign what you're announcing. If you're not going to announce it, don't sign it. Otherwise, you end up with this. As for implementation, yes.
Before you jump into the next slide, I think there's a relevant question here. Yep. Steve wants to know, what's the best practices for signing subnets that may be a part of a DDoS scrubbing service announcement? These services tend to announce the /24 being attacked.
Yes, they do. So you would create a ROA for and so the scrubbing service would have their own AS number. So you'd create a ROA with the scrubbing service's AS number. Right, so not only do you create a ROA with your own AS, you also create one with their AS, and then it's valid as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So now for implementations, now 10 years ago, this was, we were certainly looking for a needle in a haystack, because it was quite hard to try and find implementations. Cisco had theirs on XR, then iOS appeared, and we had Juniper. These days, most of the major implementations now support route origin validation. Even MikroTik came to the party very recently, and they're still working on getting that implementation working properly. But you find most of the major implementations now support ROV. And there are probably others on the list I haven't exhaustively checked, but these are the ones I'm aware of. As for validator caches, they're the 3 most popular ones, most widely used ones. I think, as Aftab will talk about later, NLNet Labs Routernator is by far the most popular one. There's Ford from Nick Mexico, Lecnic, and then of course Cloudflare's Octo RPKI. Note the RIPE NCC validator was one of the original ones. They're discontinuing this as from the 1st of July this year. So I kind of grayed it out because I don't think there's any point deploying it these days. The nice thing is with the other three is they're all Debian Ubuntu.deb packages, which makes installation very easy. Over the last 2-3 years when I've been doing training courses with this, we're jumping through the hoops of doing the install it from source has always been a big, long process. Now it's apt-get install and you're pretty much done. For deploying caches, my general advice would be to deploy at least 2 validator caches, just as the usual story of 2 of everything for redundancy. Make them geographically diverse. 2 different implementations, I think might be a good idea. Gives you software independence in case NB's got a bad day. Configure the validator to listen on v4 and v6. Well, why not? And then secure the validator as well, so that you only really have your eBGP speaking routers having access to them. And as for deploying it with an AS, again, some folks over the years I've talked with want to have validation running on every single router, but you only need it on the eBGP speaking routers. If you support ROV, it means those routers drop the invalids as they arrive from the network. You don't need to have your iBGP only routers in the core to talk with the validators because the invalids aren't even going to get there. But some people still want to be able to do that. I haven't really quite figured out why, but I would try not to create more complexity in the network. And there are still a lot of interoperability issues in trying to make this work properly. So run it on the eBGP speaking routers only to talk with the validators, and the iBGP core you can leave clean. Some folks say, well, I've got a default route pointing to upstream providers, no point me doing this. And well, there's probably no point, but then you're relying on your upstream to do ROV. And it might be a good idea. You can still run a cache, still run a validator cache and still have your eBGP routers. It just means that if you have invalids, you'll end up defaulting them to the upstream instead. So you're still helping to do your bit. So I still think there is some value in that, even if you're not in the default free zone. So summary of this, I would say all AS operators should consider deploying, so signing the ROAs and getting invalids dropped. And that's an important step to securing the routing system. Doesn't secure the path, but that's the next thing we have to try and do. And of course, with origin validation, as I'm sure you've seen in previous presentations here, looking for opportunities to stop malicious or accidental misorigination. Aftab will talk about those when he's presenting a little bit later on. Good, but lots of places looking up. I find the NIST RPKI monitor is another useful place to go and have a look at, apart from the MANRS Observatory. NLNet Labs has a nice RPKI FAQ as well. And well, NSRC has a lot of education videos. We've been quite busy over the last couple of years recording, especially with COVID shutting everything down. We've made a lot of videos, especially in this case, the BGP one, which covers a lot of the BGP best practices, routing security, and part of the content that I've covered here, but lots of videos there. Just acknowledgements. I would like to thank the National Science Foundation for promoting good routing security via the International Research Network Connections Program and promoting the work of the Network Startup Resource Center, and of course, the Internet Society for the partnership in the global efforts towards improving routing security. And that is my piece.
All right, well, thank you, Phil. And Awal, I think you were going to be number 2.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, let me share my screen. If you see the slides now. Okay, is that okay?
Swap your displays.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. So welcome everyone once again in this segment. My name is Awal, and I'm a network engineer and trainer at the Network Startup Resource Center. And I'm going to talk about, for the next 15 minutes, one of my projects with Mozilla Foundation and NSRC for about 16 months. And it was about promoting and enhancing the routing security in the South Asian region, specifically in 9 countries. The project started in October 2019 and ended in January 2021. I got support from Equinix, Apricot, MANRS, local NOCs for the countries where I have been working, and we implement some of the routing security policies. And I got extensive support and positive response from the network operators. Basically, the focus was MANRS recommendation for routing security. My work heavily involved the RPKI deployment. The goals of the project was to provide hands-on training and workshops to help people understand about the RPKI and do some awareness campaigns, because in the region, there were not much effort about informing network engineers about the RPKI and what are the benefits and what are the challenges of doing it. I had planned to do RPKI Deployathon. It is basically the simulation of RPKI deployment and doing RPKI validation in the lab to figure out what are the problems in the current technologies and what are the different deployments that have been done by the manufacturer of the different products. I also had the plan to do research and analysis of the routing table, basically to figure out the issues that we currently have in the region in terms of the BCP announcement with the RPKI. I also plan to provide direct assistance to the network operator if they have any issues in doing RPKI network. So basically what I have done, started at the beginning, I collected all the AS numbers and prepare a database manually updated by myself. In the database, I had the AS numbers per country. So after I had the database prepared, then I started analyzing the routing advertisement for each of the AS numbers. And I maintain some of the information like what are the prefixes they announced and how many of those prefixes have ROAs or invalid ROAs, or if there is no ROA at all. This database helped me follow up issues for those operators or for those AS numbers. Done those information, and then I started checking the WHOIS information to figure out the technical contact for those prefixes which had issues, for example, having invalid ROAs or having no ROAs. So I contact those admins and told them that these are the issues they have and this could possibly solve the problem that they are currently having. And if they ask for any assistance, do those assistance, or I can forward the call to somebody else. I have done that. And then I did these follow-ups and update the database and do the connection again with the system admin if they are doing it correctly or not. So this is the kind of the workflow of the whole project. And most of my time I spend communicating with the AS numbers. So more than 3,000 to 4,000 AS numbers are in these 9 countries. So I had to contact either by email or phone calls or or messaging apps to the system admins and provide them proper information that these are the issues they have at this moment with the network, and this might probably solve the problem. And once the information is with them, if they require, I help them through online instructions or with some instruction manuals, or if required, I help them directly fixing their RPKI issues. Also, I have done several conference talks, mostly related to the routing issues that I have found. And I provided I conducted technical workshops with Philip, Aftab as well, and did as well. I also post the routing analysis, routing table analysis, and posted it in blogs or in pages to get concentration of the network operators, or to get some to provide some announcement to them. Once I have some issues found, I do some analysis and find out the root cause and try to get involved in these kind of issues. And I talk to them offline, or I talk to them one-to-one to explain them what is happening and how they can solve the problem. And I also maintain my local database that I have with me to update it, to provide those stats in my conference talks. Some of the activities related to the technical conference talks, workshops, and Deployathon I have done over the years. You can see on the right side, about 20 technical events that I have participated and presented about my activities with this project. And about, in an average, about 2,000 audiences I could reach with those events. On the left side, you see the Deployathon that we have done with Philip and Aftab at Apricot in 2020. This is my favorite graph. On the left side, you can see in October 2019, when the project started, all the 9 countries valid RPKI valid BGP announcements, and over the year, over the months of and at the end of the project, around February, update, there are massive progress in terms of RPKI ROA, which makes the BGP announcements valid. It's a very high numbers compared to the beginning of the project. India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, these are the 3 big countries in terms of the BGP announcements. All of them are actually below 30% with 30% valid BGP announcements. And once I have done some work with the network operators in those countries, and you see most of the countries, they gradually started increasing in terms of the number of valid prefixes. And end of the project, out of 9 countries, 7 countries has about 50% or more than 50% valid ROAs. On the right side, at the top, I have the diagram that includes all the 9 countries together and the percentage of RPKI valid, invalid, and not found ROAs. I started with like about more than 80% of not found, which is there is no ROA for those 80% prefixes. And when the project ended, used it to a significant number, and the valid prefix, which is green one, is actually very close to more than 50% or around 60%. But interestingly, if I exclude India from this graph, then the number of valid prefixes in terms of percentage is actually more than 80%. It's close to 85%, in fact. So why? It's because India is a big country and they have a lot of big operators. They have a very large number of resources. So when they started signing in, the impact on the graph is actually become very significant. But without Indian operators or stats, it looks like other countries have around more than 50% or very close to 70-80% in some countries. For Bhutan, it's actually 100% valid now. They have all their prefixes signed. Considering they're a small country, they have a very limited number of AS numbers and number of prefixes, but it was not always easy to maintain the 100% valid BGP announcement over the several months, but they're doing it quite good. Maldives is also very close to 100%. They're probably 99% very specifically at this moment. But I'm very happy that India, later on, they try to catch up, and they're actually now very close to 50%, which has a very huge impact in a cumulative graph. On the left side, you see the impact of the project. The green one, or the blue one, is before the project started. These are the number of VRPs, which means the number of BGP prefixes covered by a ROA, valid ROA. And after the project ended, you see the purple color is actually at the end of the project, the number of VRPs for each of the countries. And you can also easily compare to the numbers with the numbers and understand how much impact the project could create for all these countries, including India, in fact. And on the right side, the only country in the region having 100% coverage, and it was one of the big achievement of the project. I'm happy that I could work with some of the network operators in Bhutan and help them to get to the 100% ROA coverage. I had challenges because it was like I was 16 months, not a small time. So over this time, I had the COVID-19 lockdown for almost all the countries, and this actually canceled all the on-site events. So kind of the workshops, conferences, and the Deployathon all got canceled. So awareness campaigns, I have carried out those awareness campaigns online. And this was very challenging because, on-site conferences has the real one-to-one interaction. When there is a conference, people come and talk to me and try to explain their problems. And I also try to solve the problem on-site. But it's difficult in a virtual environment. This was challenging, but we could actually could pass the bad times and could try to increase the number of RPKI deployment in the region. Also, when I tried to reach someone in Bangladesh, in our country, it was a little bit easier to reach somebody. But if you think that I'm sending an email to another country, not everyone welcome that. Not everyone even see it or consider to reply to my email. So this was very challenging. But with the help of the local NOG colleagues, I could reach to many of the network operators, and they had the positive attitude and replies on site, can really connect to the right person. It is very difficult to reach the right person. When I'm talking about right person means who has the information on the WHOIS database, not necessarily maintaining the BGP configuration or not maintaining their RIR membership portal. So once I call someone or reach somebody, then many of them replied that I'm not the right person, probably this is the right person in our organization. In some cases, some replied that, yeah, I'm not with that company anymore. So the WHOIS is not updated. So please try to reach someone else. So this is kind of some of the challenges. With the two-factor authentication in the membership portal, some cases they forgot their password. Sometimes they forgot to remove the TOTP from the portal, and they lost the phone or they deleted the authenticator app. So these are some of the challenges. In those cases, I had to take a APNIC help desk and connect them with the network admin, and APNIC help desk really helped and solved those problems almost instantly. So these are some of the challenges I had. But in order to make bigger impact, what I had done, and I would also suggest to anyone who wants to do that, I actually take from the database that I maintain, I actually take the bigger operator to reach them first, because if I can convince them and can help them create their ROA for the large number of prefixes, that could have a very good impact in the total statistics and could actually influence the other operators. But in our country or in the region, all the 9 countries, we do not have a large number of big operators. So in order to make consistent impact, I have to talk to all the smaller operators as well. So no one should be left out. We have tutorials, we have kind of the workshop manuals on how to create the ROAs or how to do validation. So this kind of documents help me to provide those information to the right person so that they can read those and can do the necessary tasks by themselves. An online measurement tool could be very good if I can do that, but I couldn't actually, because I'm not kind of the DevOps guy. So I couldn't do that, but I maintain my own database. But if you go to rpki.anurag.com, one of our very good colleague, Anurag Bhatia in India, he actually created a measurement tool, and that has kind of a big impact in the region, because whenever there is a jump in invalid ROAs, the database get updated and he posts it in social media to get consultation from the right network operators. So this is very helpful if you can create it. And engagement with local NOGs and with their mailing list and social media can really make a big impact in those kind of projects. And I found a very good benefit out of it. I'll share in the next slide how a social media post can change the whole picture for a country in terms of doing RPKI ROAs in the networks. And also, when you are sharing your activities, definitely the neighboring countries, and some of the NOG colleagues, they are also following it, and they also want to make the impact in their countries. So pass the positive information and share what you are doing with them could actually help. It helped me in my project. Obviously, it would be helpful for others as well. So here you can see when I was really doing pretty good with other countries except India. So I posted in Twitter that my project is doing good with all the other countries except India in about mid of July in 2020. And Anurag Bhatia, he followed that, and he actually tried to create an online portal and try to validate whether India is actually lagging behind or not. And he found that it is actually. And once he found out, he's part of the Indian NOG. So he actually promoted RPKI deployment in India and carried out several workshops and hands-on training. That actually helped. If you see the graph on the bottom right corner, the Indian prefixes around July 20, they were quite less than, it was about 12% to be specific. And after that, there is very sharp rise of valid BGP prefixes with RPKI valid ROAs. And today they are about 46%. So from 12% to 46%, you can tell it's because of a social media post. This had a very good impact on the Indian RPKI data. So what I found is that when people are aware about it, they want to do the good works. So this is the good thing about the network engineers in the South Asian region, that when they found something really very good and the right message reached to them, and they want to help, they want to do the good stuff. So this is the picture for 3 big countries who have a large number of BGP prefixes in the region. So once I started sharing the message, and you see how they created their ROAs, and the graph shows the sharp rise because of that. So all of them came forward to create ROAs for their prefixes. But here is the graph for the RPKI status of BGP prefixes for Myanmar. And you see sometimes it is, they're doing good, and sometimes they have, they get drop in terms of the valid BGP prefixes. Why? Because probably they have bigger operators who remove some ROAs or announce new BGP prefixes that doesn't covered by a ROA. And so the key message from here is there should be consistency between the RPKI ROA and the BGP announcement. So Myanmar network operators should, like many other countries, should be careful about when they're, if they are very big organization, if they have a lot of prefixes, that could really make an impact in the whole country's statistics. So whenever we are creating ROA and doing BGP announcement, there should be a consistency between these two activities. And if you see this graph, this is the number of incidents taken from MANRS Observatory over the several months, about 2 years. And you see that even though there are very big impact in terms of doing RPKI, ROA creation and doing the valid BGP announcement in the region, but in terms of the routing incidents, there's not much, there's not much improvement. So why it is? Because ROA doesn't make sense without validation, of course. So now what we are doing is we are trying to help network operators and encourage them to do validation. Once they start doing validation, if the bigger network operators can do validation, these numbers definitely will reduce significantly. So with ROA, we need to do validation as well in order to reduce routing incidents. Yeah, so this is all about my presentation, and over to you, Aftab, I think.
All right, thank you, Awal. In the interest of time, I'll start quickly. Assuming you can see the right screen, I'll just go ahead with it. So by the way, I'm Aftab Siddiqui. I work for Internet Society and part of the MANRS project. So I'll go quickly through a couple of the slides because, I mean, we all know the problem, right? So let's not talk about the problem anymore. So this is just the data I have captured it's from the last 2 years. So this is for the 2020. I mean, if you're part of the network operations team, you must have seen at least 3 bigger incidents in 2020, whether it was from Rostelecom or whether it was from the Telstra, which created massive outages. And of course, there was another one which was mostly targeting the Canadian ISPs, but of course created some problems for the network all across the globe. But if you look at the graph, we have been witnessing events on daily basis. Some do not propagate widely, some do, but it's been happening on daily basis. So this data is from the BGP stream, which is now acquired by Cisco Works. And this is for the BGP leaks. Leaks are, of course, they do happen. It's hard to monitor them because sometimes they don't even impact you because your traffic is still going through, but going through a suboptimal path. There were only 2 major incidents where there was impact on the traffic propagation as well. And if you compare it with the last 2 years between 2019 and 2020, you don't see much difference other than that there was only one large newsworthy incident in 2019, whereas in 2020, there were 3. Otherwise, on the daily basis events, nothing much has changed. And this is not new. I mean, we all been part of this industry for quite some time, and we have seen this happening on year. So in 2014 and 15, some folks who care about the routing security and do have this community spirit decided to sit down and came up with a solution, one of the solutions, not the only solution, I would say, to create MANRS, which is mutually agreed norm for routing security. These are some of the actions which Philip explained in the beginning, so I will not go into the details of what are the points, but just remember, we emphasize on 2 things quite aggressively. Number 1, filtering, and number 4, global validation. Of course, they are 2 linked together. Of course, the coordination part is still important, having a valid point of contact, whether it is email or phone. Well, we prefer the email address to have a valid email address when there is a problem. But the global validation, whether it is based on the IRD entries or the Internet Routing Registry entries through your RIR or any other IRD you are using, or through RPKI, which is the most important right now. We cannot only rely on IRR data anymore, because we all know how useful it is now. There's a lot of stale data or garbage data, I would say. So when MANRS initially started early to 2015, you can say, but up till for next 2-3 years after the start, there was a problem that there was not much uptake from the community, from the operators community. And then we realized that the biggest issue is that people don't understand that there is a problem. And to fight that understanding that, okay, there is, as long as I'm not impacted, there is no problem in my network. And to fight that, we came up with this idea to have an observatory. It is a public observatory. You can log in right now, observatory.manrs.org. It has a public view, and of course, it has a participant view. If you are part of MANRS initiative, you'll get access to look at your own AS number. And if you are one of our partner, which is NSRC, then you have access to all the data as well. So we are not creating anything of our own. We only collect data from all the publicly available data sources, whether it is BCP stream from Cisco Works, RIPE-STAT data, CIDR report maintained by Jeff Houston and Philip Smith, and CAIDA spoofer data as well, which is for the anti-spoofing. We combine them together, make sure that the data is accurate, and put all the relevant checks on it, and then publish it to the general public. But of course, we don't show AS level data to everyone. But if you are the owner or the maintainer of that AS number, you can definitely get access to that data as well. And even if you're not part of the MANRS initiative, you can get an aspiring account, which says that you are willing to be part of the initiative, but right now you just want to see that how your AS or your network is behaving on the global roundtable. We do all these measurements. It's a long list, so I'm not going to go in detail. We'll make sure that the slide deck is available for all of you to have a look. So a couple of things I would like to highlight is that in the data sources, as I mentioned, we heavily relied on only one data source for last 2 years. That was BGP Stream Crossword. But as I said, it is now acquired by Cisco. So we have to make sure that to maintain the continuity, we have to have multiple data sources for the BGP, for the route hijack incidents. Most of the services available, of course, are commercial services. So we have worked out with CAIDA, who are working on a project called GRIP. They use the data source from route views, which Philip initially highlighted, because the biggest issue is we have to have enough vantage points globally to give you the right information. If you don't have enough vantage point, then the incident you see is usually very skewed. Thankfully, route views has enough data point, and they are increasing, so we don't have to worry about that in the coming future. Rest, we are working on other data sources to make sure that we have alternate of every data source, and we'll be adding it to the MANRS Observatory. Now, quickly going through some data which we have collected from the observatory. This is again public view. You can log in right now. This is the historical view from last year, this month, April 2020 to April 2021. Of course, you can see there is a slight dip in number of incidents, whether it is route hijack or route leaks. Of course, there is a high number of bogons which have been added because of what happened in the Efrenic. There were some deregistrations of some IP addresses, but yeah, it became bogons all of a sudden. And they are still there and gradually decreasing. But the only positive thing I see in this graph is the rise in ROAs, the RPKI, which Awal also highlighted in the South Asian segment, that it's a big chunk happening. Again, if I look at the country view for the United States only, because as most of the participants are from that region, well, the outlook is not very good for the RPKI, I would say. But there's a lot of prefixes in the country and in the North American region, so I wouldn't say that it's really bad, but it's not very promising, and it should be. Well, this picture is from the RIPE stats. You can see the color. I mean, the brighter the green, the better it is. So some countries are doing really very good, some are not. But on a global scale, we can see that there is a 9% jump from last year to this year. Still, there is around 70% unknowns. Unknowns are okay right now. I would say they are okay right now, but the invalids are something which we need to work out as early as possible, because if it is an invalid, to just make sure that you have serious issues with the propagation. So how it is going right now? So I got the statistics like an hour ago. It is from the session of Routinator I'm using. So there are around 72,000 ROAs and around 307,000 VRPs. So just in case if you're having confusion that what is the ROA and a VRP, it's because of the how relying party software uses these two words. ROA can have multiple VRPs in it, like multiple prefix AS combination in single ROAs, and VRP is something we have to look for. VRP define one individual prefix and AS combination. So this is the important number. There are 307,000 VRPs at the moment. This is very, very current. And it is increasing on daily basis. And the biggest share of the ROAs is from the RIPE region, of course. They have adopted the RPKI quite early. APNIC is catching up, but of course, the other LACNIC and Efrenic are lagging behind at the moment. So this is the data I have gathered from a service provided by a website called RPKI.today. It gives you a historical view of how many VRPs added or on daily basis, on hourly basis, monthly basis. You can select your time duration. So in last 1 year or 12 months, most of the VRPs added are from these ASN. So they are from US 20115, from multiple AS numbers from India. Of course, as Awal was saying, they are one of the biggest network operators in the region and in the world as well. So of course, if they are adding ROAs, then it's impacting on the global level. But of course, most of the big countries are in the list because they have added most of the ROAs. So you can see Google as well in the list. Of course, they have added a lot of ROAs in the last couple of months. And this is for the today only. The maximum number of ROA added in last 12 hours was from Brazil, from this network, Russia, Netherlands, and other countries as well. So you can see like around 200 or 300 VRPs are added on day-to-day basis. Sometimes they goes over the board and like few thousands are added as well. So this is, Dr. Philip was explaining the uptake of which relying party software is being used mostly. It's a clear cut message that Routinator is mostly used. And the other options are a RIPE validator. And you can see some people, very few are still using the RIPE version 2 validator. Then we have Octo, RPKI, and Ford. Unfortunately, the RIPE validator will be discontinued from this year. And what we know that the Octo RPKI is not in active maintenance at the moment. I mean, there is nothing wrong with it. It's still working very well, but they are. But if there is an issue, they will not be able to sort that out in next coming months, I would say. But the most updated and maintained relying party software at the moment is Routinator. So during so this is the research done by John Christoph and Randy Bush and others in the last couple of months. It gives you a clear picture that most of the people who have installed relying party software, irrespective of which software they're using, whether it is Routinator, RIPE, or Octo, they are all using the default values. So they just install it and then they don't change anything about it. So the syncing can be from 2 minutes to 10 minutes or up to 60 minutes in some cases, which is not the ideal thing to do. So if you are installing, and this is what we were trying to share during the Deployathon, that when you install a relying party software, make sure you make certain changes, certain tweaks in it to satisfy your requirement. So this is just an indication that it is not a good idea just to leave everything on default. Now, so why are these obstacles happening? I mean, what are the obstacles for the operators right now? And we are not even talking about the route origin validation. That is the second step in terms of the from where you want to go. You have to create your ROA first before I would say that you start dropping invalids. We have done enough outreach, NSRC, all the RIRs, we have been doing it for quite some time. And as I said in the slide deck, APNIC started their Ready to ROA campaign in 2015. It's almost 6 years now. So we still have the 30% RPKI adoption. Most of the time, what we see is there's a fear. If you're not actively involved in the community, the fear is that if I create a ROA, something bad will happen. We've been trying to tell people that creating ROA is absolutely no non-service impacting unless you are creating invalid ROAs somehow. So there shouldn't be a problem. There are certain legal barriers. Most importantly, the way Arintel is handled, but that is from the validation part, not from the ROA creation part. So that shouldn't be a problem in that scenario, at least. That the third and fourth, the most important part is the legacy space, right? We have heard it quite a lot. This is very prominent in ARIN region and APNIC regions because there's a lot of legacy space. Of course, the problem exists in every RIR, but there's not much, either the policies are very easy or there's not much space in the region. So I looked up the policies in every RIR, and I know about the APNIC because I'm very heavily involved in that one. They recently announced that anyone with the legacy space can actually just pay the initial membership joining fees, and that's it. They don't have to pay for the resources, because that was the issue. Because the moment you start paying for the resources, your fee will jump from a few $100s to a few $1,000s. So at least that is that's been sorted by APNIC EC. If you are a legacy space holder, you can simply pay a small amount and become a member, and you get all the services. So you can create ROAs. RIPE legacy space holders, they have to become an LIR member. ARIN, it's very cheap. You can be a member by registering yourself, and then there's a gradual increase in the services fee to match the resources you hold. LACNIC and AFRINIC, the only offer they have is you have to become a member to start getting the RPKI services. It is good that they all have policies, but I think more encouragement is required to bring legacy space holders into this arena. Otherwise, there will be a lot of resources without any RPKI support or the ROAs as well. So these are the challenges we need to focus on towards ROA adoption. I mean, I would say if you are part of a network operator and have access to the have right access to the RIR portal where you can create ROAs, I would say just then create it according to what you are advertising. Don't create on the basis of up to /24 on the maximum length or /64 on the V6 maximum length, but create it on the basis of whatever you are advertising. And if you are not advertising a prefix and you want to protect it, as I said on the chat, then you can create AS0 ROA as well. Every RIR supports that. So if you want to learn more about all these things, then you can go to the manrs.org website. And that's all from my end. That was a bit quick, but if you have any questions, happy to answer.
All right, well, thank you, Phil and Awal and Aftab for going through all that information. Certainly some interesting stuff. So I will put out a call here. If people do have any questions, certainly ask them in the chat room and we'll get them repeated and we can try to get answers there. I think one observation that I wanted to make, and maybe you guys have some thoughts on this, is that looking at Awal's graphs that he was showing, there was a lot of uptick right around the start of the pandemic. Has there been any sort of thought or investigation that you guys have done to that? Is this just the sort of thing that bubbled up as a project around that time that people finally had a chance to do? Or was it motivated by anything else? I just thought those graphs were pretty striking that we saw that data starting around the middle of 2020.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, actually, it was quite stark in terms of the activities that we have been doing, like training and awareness campaigns. But what I have done is, instead of waiting for the pandemic to go away and the world gets normal, what I have done that I started reaching the network operators over emails and try to contact the local NOGs if I can connect to the right person for this AS number or this prefix owner. And also I did some blog posts in this time and do massive campaign on the social media. Social media specifically in the region is basically Facebook. All the NOGs has the Facebook pages where I posted. And once the message is quite spread all over the region, then even though it is pandemic, but people could create ROA when they're doing home office. So many of my tweets and Facebook posts has this kind of language that this AS number created that number of ROAs today while they are doing office from home. Why don't you can fix it? So this kind of campaigns I have done. And I think except the Deployathon and the hands-on workshop, other activities were quite okay doing online. So that was interesting that even though the pandemic struck all over the network activities, but this was not that much difficult.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love the fact that you used a little bit of gamesmanship there to say, hey, look at this AS. They added all of these. How come everybody else isn't doing the same? Hopefully that sort of approach continues into the future to get people adopting this. I guess my other question, and whoever wants to answer it, is what are the remaining barriers to convince people to sort of go down this road and implement this? Is it still just a lack of understanding, a lack of time? Certainly it's gaining traction, but how do we get to the next level of adoption and sort of acceptance of this?
Philip, that would be the perfect question for you.
Oh, I was waiting to be delegated the question. I mean, believe it or not, there's still a lot of people who don't actually know about any of this. They're not aware, or is it, oh, do I need to do that? Oh, I thought it's just for the tier ones, or it's just for the transit provider, or oh, it's something that affects other people. And there's still a lot of that I find just in the general conversation that's going out. And even before we all stopped traveling because of the COVID pandemic, talking about some of the other MANRS principles. You mentioned BCP 38 and people go, well, what on earth is that? Source address thing. Oh, what's that all about? And people have never even heard of it. And this is what was it? BCP 38, it's from 2000. Was it 1999, 2000, something like that? And so I don't know. I mean, it's, being slightly sarcastic. I think too many people are still designing the networks and configuring the networks out of vendor configuration guides rather than participating in the network operator community. We look at a lot of the NOGs, the NOG community. We do a lot of these presentations in the different NOGs and so on, but I always think it's, it's the same people who are coming, we're preaching to the converted or to the choir. We're never able to reach out to a lot of the people who are just simply not aware of what's going on. And so I really think it's going to take campaigns like Awal. We just take Awal and copy them hundreds of times and just send them to all these different parts of the world and just get on and do it, because it's that hands-on awareness reaching out to absolutely everybody that it's really going to make the difference. There are some people who say, oh, no, I don't want to do that. It might break things. We'll always get those. But, I think I don't know if there's a critical number where to make this effective, but even if we can get 75% of the internet doing this, this is going to make a huge difference in at least helping secure the system. My thoughts on it.
Yeah, so that jogged the memory. So first of all, yes, we'd all like to be able to clone the true evangelists in our community. If anybody's ever seen the movie Multiplicity, though, that breaks down after a certain amount. But to your point of how can we get the vendor community on board here? Is it the thing that it needs to be put into their standard documentation? If people are just looking at what the vendor says to do when they set up one of these networks, should this information be included there, knowing that a lot of the vendor community is a part of the NOGs and hears this same message as well? I not that I have a great answer here. It just seems like that may be one thing to try, since I know that you guys have some good relationships with certain national and international vendor communities.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. You tend to find it's rather than the vendor as a whole entity participating, it's a few people who are really invested in the network operators community and who are trying their best. I mean, I remember, my days, I was 13 years at Cisco from 98 to 2011. That was my job. It was really participating in the NOG community and then bringing a lot of the industry best practices back within the vendor. A lot of the training courses that I'm still doing even today are based on a lot of that learning, and it was used inside Cisco, and it was hopefully trying to make a little bit of difference in how that as a vendor. And I know Juniper did a lot of similar things as well. But it's probably not as widespread as it needs to be. And then of course you reach in the next level with systems integrators and so forth, and how well aware they are of a lot of these things. I suppose we can't just say, oh, it's all the vendors and it's up to them to fix it, because we care for what we wish for. But it just needs a general concerted effort across everybody, really to try and make some of these improvements, getting the vendors to do their bit to persuade their customers, do an industry best practice of what they should be doing, not just MANRS, RPKI, but just everything for setting up, configuring the network infrastructure.
So just to add to that, Jason, what we have done recently and very recently in MANRS is we have started a MANRS for Vendors program. And we have joined hands with big names like Cisco, Juniper, Arista, Nokia, and of course the the software vendors provider, software routing provider as well. And we have formed a working group. We have formed a task force, and the idea is that all these vendors will provide the list of their operating system, their hardware, which supports all the best practices. For example, which one supports the RPKI, and to the best of the extent it comply with the RFC, because some of the vendors who supports RPKI, they do not comply with the RFC. They have a very broken implementation of the how to do the route origin validation. So we are making an attempt to make sure that vendors are involved, because then sometimes they complain that, oh, we don't have the platform to talk about these things. We only get a request from a service provider and then we satisfy them. So we are trying our level best. So it's not in the task force, it's not only vendors. We have big service providers from the MANRS community who has joined and has taken interest that they would like to provide feedback to the vendors. So it's an attempt. Let's see how it goes. In next couple of weeks, we'll be able to share it with the community.
All right. Well, I think that sounds like a good plan. And Jessica did point out a lack of incentive for doing so for organizations with limited engineering resources. And Steve pointed out the approach that the NSRC has always used of trying to cultivate the operators into helping each other. So I think that's a perfect way to sort of end this out. So I want to thank you three again for giving your time. I know it's late for where all of you are, or incredibly early, either way. So thank you again to the speakers for going on today. We did post the slides, and we'll make sure that we get this video posted as well. And if there are any other questions, certainly they can be answered by the NSRC team or others on the mailing list. And for anybody else who's still listening, next week's talk is going to be an update on the European PerfSonar Users Workshop. We're going to be back to our regular Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern time for that. So hope everybody has a good rest of your week and weekend, and we will talk to everybody soon.